Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the elite members of the channel. Thank you all for your continuous, dedicated, and sincere support of this channel. I appreciate you more than I can put into words. So, instead, I'll do what I do best, narrate. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled A Mega Compilation Part 1. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. I stood before the looming Victorian monstrosity in South Wales, its 3 stories clawing at the overcast sky like skeletal fingers. My parents had snatched it from the jaws of a bankrupt builder's folly, a foreclosure deal that reeked of desperation. The house, born in the 1880s, was a hollowed-out corpse of a home. Its innards stripped to bare bones. The ground floor was a chaotic building site, littered with debris, while the upper floors were little more than echoing shells, their walls whispering of neglect. Structurally sound, they said, but something about its gaunt silhouette gave me goosebumps. My father, ever practical, asked me to squat in this forsaken place to ward off thieves or vagrants. I agreed, though the house seemed to watch me as I hauled my camp bed in the main living area. Electricity buzzed through its veins and hot water gurgled in the pipes. The builder had sealed it tight against the elements, replacing ancient windows with soulless UPVC frames that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. It should have felt secure, but the air inside was heavy, as if the house resented my intrusion. The first night I lay awake, the silence oppressive. Then, a sound, a door creaking open to a distant room, followed by the deliberate thud of its closing. My pulse quickened. I grabbed a flashlight and crept through the skeletal corridors, the beam trembling in my hand. Nothing. No one. Just those old wooden doors, thick and unyielding, standing smugly shut. No drafts stirred the air. The house was a tomb. Yet, night after night, the doors played their sinister game, opening and closing with no cause, as if unseen hands mocked my solitude. Over 3 years, the sound became a heartbeat, a reminder that I was never truly alone. When my parents finally tamed the chaos, erasing the builder's half-hearted efforts, the house transformed. Fresh paint and polished floors couldn't mask its unease. But my family moved in. My parents, my sister, and briefly my brother before he fled to his girlfriend's place. I claimed the top floor, a realm of 2 bedrooms and a barren kitchenette. The front room faced the street, its windows rattled by relentless traffic. The back bedroom, overlooking the shadowed garden, promised quiet. I chose the latter, setting my bed under the watchful gaze of the slanted ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. On the 3rd night, I jolted awake, my heart hammering. A wet, rhythmic panting filled the air, inches from my face. I froze, expecting to feel the hot breath of some beast. Nothing, just darkness. It happened again and again, always at the witching hour. I learned from a neighbor that the house's last tenant, an old man, had lived here, with a loyal German shepherd at his side. The dog was long dead, but its phantom breath haunted me. Then came the creaks, slow, deliberate, like a rocking chair swaying under an unseen weight. Rustling followed, sharp and papery, as if someone turned the pages of a newspaper just beyond my sight. I imagined an old man, spectral and stubborn, lingering in the room, his chair groaning under his ghostly form. Desperate, I tried the retreating front bedroom. The traffic's roar was a relentless assault, and the room trapped heat like a furnace. I retreated to the back, my nerves frayed. One night, I spoke to the emptiness, my voice trembling. "Please, keep the dog quiet." The panting lessened, but never stopped. The house listened, but it didn't obey. The strangest horror crept in so slowly, I didn't notice it at first. After 2 years, I began to hear voices, low, murmuring, like a clandestine gathering in the shadows of my room. Men's voices, mostly, laced with laughter that felt too intimate, too knowing. Glasses clinked. A gramophone's ghostly hum underscored their chatter. Sometimes a woman's voice threaded through, soft but sharp. I couldn't make out words, just snatches of conversations that dissolved when I strained to listen. I pictured them in the 1930s garb, suits and fedoras, dresses with sharp shoulders, but I had no reason to picture them so. The senses felt burrowed from some forgotten film, yet they unfolded in my room, night after night. I confided in my father with a voice cracking with fear that I feared I was unraveling. He dismissed the voices, but admitted to his own unease, things he wouldn't name. His eyes darted to the ceiling, as if the house itself eavesdropped. The voices grew bolder, a weekly ritual that left me trembling. I lay awake, their laughter curling around me like smoke, wondering if I'd become part of their spectral party. When I finally escaped to a new flat, the silence was a revelation. Weeks passed without a single word. No panting, no creaks. I laughed with tears streaming, tears of joy. I wasn't mad after all. The house had woven its spell, and I'd broken free. But in 2002, after my father's death, I returned to help my mother. The first night there, the voices surged back, louder, hungrier, as if they'd waited for me. Their laughter wasn't kind anymore. It was a chorus of malice, welcoming me back to their eternal reverie. I knew then that the house wasn't just haunted. It was. It was alive, and it had claimed a piece of me I'd never reclaim. The rain was cold, relentless drizzle as I pulled up to Throckmorton Airfield, a forsaken relic of World War II that squatted in the bleak Worcestershire countryside. It was barely 6 a.m. on a March morning in 2005. The sky, a bruised gray that seemed to press down on the earth. My job with the Highways Agency traffic officers, HATO as we called it, had brought me here to this desolate place to inventory a fleet of vehicles stored in Hangar 1. For 20 years, I'd managed fleets for big companies, government departments, you name it. I'd seen odd things, felt the occasional shiver down my spine, but nothing like what waited for me that day. Nothing that made my blood run cold and my soul scream to flee. The airfield was a ghost of its wartime self, its runways cracked and painted with mock motorways for training new traffic officers. Hangar 1 loomed ahead, a cavernous steel beast, its rusted exterior swallowing the weak dawn light. Inside, 15 Land Rovers and Nissan Pathfinders stood in a silent row against the far wall, their high, checkered livery glinting faintly under the flicker of my car's headlights. I'd driven from Basingstoke, living at 4:30 a.m. through thick fog that clung to the roads like a living thing, and now the rain added its own oppressive weight. I wondered if this miserable weather would haunt me all day. I stopped by the gatehouse first, exchanging a quick word with Darren, the airfield manager. His office was a cramped, warm haven, and I made a cup of coffee in his tiny kitchen, clutching the travel mug like a talisman. "Just doing the inventory," I told him, forcing a smile. He nodded, his eyes lingering on me, a moment too long, as if he knew something I didn't. I drove to Hangar 1, the gravel crunching under my tires, and unlocked the massive roller doors. They groaned as I shoved one open, just enough to slip my car inside, then closed it to keep out the rain. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of oil and decay, and the silence was a physical thing, pressing against my eardrums. I flicked on the hangar's lights, their harsh fluorescence buzzing to life, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe in the corners. The vehicles stood like centennials, their rears against the wall, nose pointing inward. I grabbed my clipboard and began the tedious work, checking tire treads, testing lights, counting traffic cones and spill kits. The hangar was vast, its empty expanse swallowing sound and my footsteps echoing like accusations. I was halfway through, my head buried in the back of a Pathfinder, when a voice shattered the silence, a thick northern accent booming and impossibly close. "Okay, give it a try now." My heart stopped. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Who the hell was that? I straightened, my clipboard clattering to the floor, and stepped between the vehicles, scanning the hangar. The lights buzzed overhead, but the shadows seemed darker, thicker. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin and trembling. Nothing. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating, a void that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. I called again. "Is anyone there?" But the words felt like they were swallowed by the hangar's maw. My gut twisted, a primal scream urging me to run, run, run. I learned young to trust my instinct, and it was roaring now, louder than the voice had been. I sprinted down the row of SUVs, my boots slipping on the slick concrete. My hands fumbled with the roller door, wrenching it open just enough to squeeze my car through. I drove inside, the engine roaring to life as I floored the accelerator, tires screeching on the wet tarmac. The hangar's gaping mouth receded in my rearview mirror, but I could still feel its gaze on my back, cold and malevolent. I didn't stop until I reached Darren's office, bursting through the door, my breath ragged. Darren later told me I was white as a ghost, shaken so badly he had to guide me to the old sofa in the office. I remember it differently, calmly walking in, sinking into the cushions. But the fear was real, a living thing clawing at my insides. Darren didn't seem surprised. "Did you see something, or was it the voice?" he asked, his tone too knowing. He poured me an Irish tea, heavy on the whiskey, and told me a story that made my skin crawl. "Hangar 1," he said, "was alive with something darker than ghosts. During the war, 2 mechanics had worked on a Wellington bomber in that very hangar. One stood on the wing, the other beneath, tinkering with the engine. "Okay, try it now," the man on the wing had said, and the engine roared to life, catching the ground mechanic off guard. He stumbled, fell into the spinning propeller, and was torn apart in an instant. His blood painted the hangar floor. Darren couldn't explain the malice that lingered. But I wasn't the first to feel it. Others had fled Hangar 1, their faces ashen, their stories eerily similar. "It's not just a ghost," he said, his voice low. "It's angry." I sat there, the tea burning my throat, trying to steady my hands. The hangar's voice echoed in my mind, not just a sound, but a presence, heavy and hateful. I wanted to laugh it off, to call it exhaustion or nerves, but the dread was too real, too deep. Worse, I still had a job to do. After an hour, my nerves barely steadied. I drove back. The roller door stayed open the entire time, the rain pattering inside, and I left my car's engine idling. A lifeline to escape. I moved quickly, checking the remaining vehicles with one eye on the shadows, half expecting that voice to boom again. Or, worse, to see the figure it belonged to. A spectral mechanic, his eyes burning with rage, his hands stained with blood that wasn't his. The hangar watched me, its silence no longer empty, but alive, pulsing with something that hated my presence. I finished the inventory in record time, my heart pounding, and fled without looking back. Even now, years later, the memory of that voice sends goosebumps across my skin. Hangar number 1 wasn't just haunted, it was a predator, and I felt its teeth at my throat. The house we bought in that Midwestern state 14 years ago was a dream turned nightmare, a multi-story relic from the early 90s that crouched in a cookie-cutter neighborhood. Its identical neighbors hiding their own secrets. My husband and I, transplants with no kin nearby, thought it was a fresh start, our first home. We had 2 cats when we moved in. Their quiet presence was a comfort. And 4 months later, we adopted Violet, a tiny kitten with eyes that seemed to see beyond the veil. I didn't know then that the house was watching us, its walls pulsing with something ancient and restless, something that would make my skin crawl and my soul recoil. We threw ourselves into redecorating, painting over the bland beige walls, trying to make the place ours. My husband worked swing shifts, leaving me alone most nights, while I kept a steady day job with weekends free. The solitude didn't bother me at first, but the house had other plans. It started with knots, sharp, deliberate raps against the exterior walls, like something was testing the house's boundaries. They came at night, irregular, but insistent, always from the direction of the dining room. I'd lie awake, clutching the edge of my blanket, telling myself It was just the house settling. But houses don't settle with such malice. One evening, Violet changed everything. She was barely 4 months old, a fragile thing, when she leapt onto the kitchen counter, stood on her hind legs, and let out a guttural growl that didn't belong to a kitten. Her eyes were locked on the dining room, her tiny body rigid with fury. I followed her gaze, my heart pounding, and as I stepped into the room, the knocks erupted, sharp, mocking dings that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen presence that pressed against my skin. I don't know why I did it, but I knocked back, my fist trembling against the wall. A faint knock answered from the basement. Below, tentative, but clear. I slammed my knuckles harder. A challenge. The response was immediate. A thunderous bang from the dining room wall that shook the floor beneath me. I crept downstairs, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark. The basement was barren. Just our washer, dryer, and a pile of dirty clothes. Nothing moved. But the air felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. The knocks resumed, upstairs, louder, haunting. I stormed back to the dining room, my annoyance outweighing my fear, and pounded a pattern. One knock, then 3 quick ones. The house answered with 2 hard, deliberate bangs, as if whatever lurked there was playing my game and winning. Violet was back on the counter, growling, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I grabbed my keys and fled to my husband's job site, my hands shaking as I told him about the knocks, the kitten's terror. He promised to check the house when he got home, but even as he searched, the knocks followed him, a sinister rhythm that mocked our attempts to understand. The disturbances continued, a nightly ritual that chipped away at my sanity. I didn't tell my mother at first. She and my father lived far away, and my father, though open to our Navajo beliefs to a point, didn't fully buy into the spiritual. One night, my husband and I were watching a movie. The cats curled up nearby. We dozed off, the room dim and quiet. Something shifted, a presence so heavy it pulled me from my sleep. I opened my eyes, and there he was, a man in a gray sweatsuit, standing inches from the couch. His head and hands were a blur, like static on an old TV, a fearless void where a face should have been. My breath caught, my body froze. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was a dream. But when I opened them, he was still there, unmoving, his faceless gaze boring into me. I screamed my husband's name, and the figure vanished, leaving only the echo of my own voice. My husband searched the house, finding nothing but the lingering weight of something watching. I called my mother the next day, my voice trembling as I spilled everything. The knocks, violent growls, the faceless man. She and my father were already planning to visit. She told me to burn cedar and blow the smoke at the apparition if it appeared again. Until they arrived, I refused to stay in the house alone. Violet's growls grew fiercer, and even our older cats began to stare into the dining room, their hackles raised as if they saw what I couldn't. The air felt charged, like the house was coiling, waiting to strike. When my parents arrived, my mother took charge. She's a woman of deep Navajo wisdom, her faith in the old ways unshakable. She asked to sleep in the bedroom above the dining room, the one that seemed to be the heart of the disturbance. For 3 nights, she listened, her presence a quiet anchor against the house's malice. On the 3rd night, she declared it was time. After this, you don't speak of it for 3 days, she said, her voice firm. She began the ceremony, singing Daine peyote songs that wove through the house like a protective thread. She walked the property, cedar smoke curling from her hands, blessing every room. In the dining room, as her prayers reached a crescendo, a deafening clang erupted, like metal striking metal, shaking the walls. My father, standing nearby, paled but said nothing. The ceremony lasted an hour, simple but heavy with power. And when it ended, the house felt quieter but not at peace. 3 days later, my mother set us down. Her face was grim as she described what she found. There were 2 spirits trapped in the house, bound by their own tragedies. The first was a boy, no older than 16, who haunted the left side of our property. She'd seen him outside the 2nd-story bedroom window, pelting rocks at the glass, his face twisted with desperation. When she confronted him, he spoke of wanting to talk to his friend, the previous owner's son. I need to stop him before he does it, the boy had said, his voice breaking. My mother realized he was reliving the day he took his own life, unaware he was dead, caught in an endless loop of regret. She guided him to the light, freeing him from his torment. But his sorrow lingered in the air, a weight I could still feel. The second spirit was the man in the gray sweatsuit, the one whose faceless form had loomed over me. He lived in the house, loved it fiercely, and refused to leave, even in death. My mother had spoken to him, her voice sharp. You're scaring my daughter, she said. Stop appearing like that. She told us to set terms with him, to let him stay if he meant no harm. So we did. My husband and I, standing in the dining room, speaking to the empty air. You can stay, I said, my voice shaking. We'll take care of the house. Since then, he's been quiet, a silent tenant, but I feel his presence sometimes watching from the shadows. After my parents left, I approached our neighbor across the street, a kind woman who knew the neighborhood's secrets. I asked about the house to our west, where a widow lived, always drunk, always loud. The neighbor's face fell. A year before we moved in, the widow's son had killed himself in their basement. She found him, and the grief had broken her, driving her to the bottle. I understood her pain now, and we began checking on her, offering kindness where we'd once kept our distance. I also asked about our home's previous owner. Their son, Aaron, had been best friends with the boy who died, growing up together, inseparable. A year after my mother's ceremony, Aaron visited the neighborhood and knocked on our door, asking to see his old home. He walked through each room, pointing out updates his father would have loved. When I asked him which bedroom was his, he pointed to the one above the dining room, the one my mother had slept in. He lingered by the window, his voice soft as he spoke of his childhood friend, who used to throw rocks at the glass to get his attention. Then, he said something that chilled me. His father had died shortly after selling the house, heartbroken to leave it behind. I realized then that the faceless man was Aaron's father, tethered to the home he couldn't let go. The house is quieter now, but it's never truly still. Sometimes late at night, I hear a faint knock, a whisper of that boy's desperation, or feel the weight of the father's gaze. My mother's ceremony gave us peace, but it didn't erase the house's hunger. It's a place that holds on to its dead, and I wonder if it's holding on to a piece of me, too. I met Nova in the summer of 2016 when I was 22 and adrift in a world that felt too small for my restless soul. He was in his early 20s, but there was something ancient about him, like he'd walked through centuries before landing in our time. Nova was the kind of guy who seemed to vibrate with a secret knowledge, his eyes always glinting with a quiet intensity, as if he saw beyond the veil of reality. He believed in magic, not the stage kind, but the raw, primal force of energy shaping the world, of will bending fate. I was raised Catholic, turned agnostic, skeptical of anything I couldn't touch or measure, but Nova cracked my defenses wide open. We clicked instantly, like we'd been brothers in some forgotten life, bound by a thread that transcended time. He was home to me, a beacon in the gray haze of my existence in Jersey, even though he lived deep in Queens. His family knew me, though. I never met them, as if he'd woven me into their stories. He was always at my place, filling it with laughter, his wild ideas, his presence that made the air feel alive. Nova was a dancer, a master of flow who moved like liquid fire, commanding any beat with a grace that seemed otherworldly. Watching him glide across the dance floor was like witnessing a ritual, his body a conduit for something ancient and free. He inspired me to try shuffling, though I was clumsy at first, my feet stumbling where his flowed. But Nova was patient, guiding me step by step, his voice steady and warm. He had a gift, not just for dance, but for seeing people, really seeing them. He noticed the cracks in me, the scars of childhood trauma I buried deep, the weight I carried in silence. He wanted to help me, to peel back the layers of pain and fear. That's when he suggested we drop LSD together. I never touched psychedelics. I heard stories, sure, but Nova saw them as more than a trip, a tool for growth, a key to unlock the hidden corners of the mind, to touch the raw pulse of existence. His theories were wild, bordering on madness, but they resonated, stirring something in me I couldn't name. I trusted him, so I agreed. It was November 2016, a chilly night in my cramped Jersey apartment, the air thick with anticipation. We dropped the acid, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of laughter and wonder. Colors bled, time warped, and we floated in a sea of nothing and everything. Then, the conversation took a turn, veering into territory that felt like a chasm opening beneath us. "Hey, man," Nova said, his voice cutting through the haze. "What would you do if I died?" The question hit me like a blade, cold and sharp, slicing through the euphoria. I froze, caught off guard, and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. I'd haunt you." He laughed, that wide, mischievous grin lighting up his face, but his eyes held a strange glint, like he was peering into a future I couldn't see. "Well, I'd come back as your cat," he said, without hesitation, as if it were a vow carved into stone. "A cat? I can't even have a dog in this place." He shrugged, his grin widening. "That's why I said a cat." I pushed back, half joking, saying if he did come back, he'd have to be an orange tabby like Garfield, smart, independent, full of character. We laughed, sealed it with a handshake, the moment passing like a flicker of shadow. We moved on, the night swallowing the conversation. I didn't think of it again. Not then. Life rolled on, but cracks began to form. My birthday was approaching, February 3rd, 2017, and Nova and I had plans to hit a club where I'd get free drinks for bringing 10 friends. We even arranged for me to pick up a mutual friend from Pennsylvania and drive her back the next day. But Nova had loaned me some gear, expecting me to cover him with money from a refund I was waiting on. The disbursement dragged, tensions simmered, and by February, we were barely speaking. A fight erupted, raw and bitter, and I was furious. He skipped my birthday, and someone else picked up a friend. At the club, midnight hit, and I was buzzed, ignoring his last text, asking about the money. I didn't reply. My anger, a shield against the guilt, gnawing at me. I didn't know it would be the last message he'd ever send. The next morning, I woke to a nightmare. My phone buzzed with texts, missed calls, fragments of horror. A car accident. Nova missing. The driver he'd asked to take our friend home, dead. They'd been going 140 in a 40. Hit a divider, flipped, rolled, all gone. Just like that. My world collapsed. It was my fault, or so it felt. If I'd answered his text, if I'd made things right, if I'd picked her up myself, maybe they'd still be here. The guilt was a living thing clawing at my chest, dragging me into a spiral of despair. I was failing college, drowning in grief, barely functioning. Nova wasn't just a friend, he was my twin flame, the one person who saw me, who made me feel whole. Without him, I was hollow, a ghost in my own life. At his funeral, I met his family, their faces etched with a sorrow that mirrored mine. His mother, her eyes brimming with pain, saw the wreck I'd become. She pressed an envelope into my hands, her voice soft but heavy. "He wanted you to have these." Inside were his ashes, a piece of him to keep close. I bought a tree of life necklace, storing some of the ashes inside, wearing it like a talisman against the void. It was a small comfort, but the emptiness gnawed at me, a wound that wouldn't close. Weeks passed, and I drifted deeper into darkness, the world a muted gray. Then, one afternoon, my sister called. She and Nova had been close, connected through me, even sharing a friends with benefits fling. She lived just around the corner, and we hung out often. "Bro," she said, her voice tinged with unease. "I need a favor. There's this cat hanging around my place, meowing like crazy, won't leave. Rex is gonna kill it." She meant her pit bull, a beast with a mean streak. I didn't hesitate. walking over to her place, my mind numb. She opened the door, and out strolled a 6-month-old orange tabby, its fur catching the light like a flicker of flame. The moment our eyes locked, my heart stopped. I knew, and the cat knew too. Its gaze was piercing, too human, too familiar. I dropped to my knees, tears streaming down my face, my body shaking. It was Nova. My sister freaked, demanding to know what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I scooped the cat up, holding him close, whispering through sobs, "It's you. You're back." She didn't believe me, not until I told her about our promise, that fleeting joke about him returning as an orange cat. She scoffed, skeptical. Then the cat, Nova, lifted a paw, placing it gently on my necklace, the one holding his ashes. His eyes bore into mine, intense, unyielding, a silent confirmation that pierced my soul. My sister screamed, backing away, but I just held him, my heart pounding with a mix of awe and dread. This wasn't just a cat. This was him, keeping his vow, defying death itself. Life shifted after that, though. Normal was a lie, I told myself. Nova, the cat, became part of my world, curling up beside me, his presence a balm for my shattered heart. He knew me, just as he had in life, sensing when I needed him most, his purring a quiet anchor in the storm of my grief. But there was something unsettling about him, too, a flicker of something beyond feline in his gaze, a weight to his silence that made my skin prickle. I'd catch him staring at corners of the room, his eyes tracking something I couldn't see, his body tense as if guarding me from an unseen threat. At night, he'd perch on my chest, his weight heavier than it should be, his eyes glowing in the dark, watching me with an intensity that felt like a warning. My perspective on reality fractured. I stopped questioning the unseen, the impossible, because I've already lived it. Nova had kept his promise, but at what cost? I wondered if his return was a gift or a debt, to tether to something I didn't understand. The necklace grew warm against my skin sometimes, a pulse that synced with a heartbeat, as if his ashes were alive, whispering. I'd dream of him, human Nova, standing in a void, his grin fading into something sorrowful, his voice echoing, "I'm here, but not for long." I'd wait till the cat stared, his eyes reflecting a truth I wasn't ready to face. I told my sister everything, and though she tried to rationalize it, the memory of that paw on the necklace haunted her. She'd visit, eyeing the cat warily, her laughter forced. "He's just a cat, right?" she'd say, but her voice trembled. I didn't argue. I knew better. Nova the cat helped me heal, pulling me from the edge of despair. But his presence was a reminder that the veil between the worlds is thin, and what crosses it doesn't always leave. I'd find scratches on my furniture, too precise, too deliberate, forming patterns I didn't dare decipher. One, I woke to find the necklace on the floor, its clasp undone, the cat sitting beside it, his gaze unreadable. I'm 31 now, and Nova the cat is still with me. Though he's slower, his fur grayer, he still watches, still guards, but I feel a shift, a fading. I dread the day he leaves, not just for the loss of him, but for what it might mean. Did he come back to save me or to bind me to something else? The air in my apartment feels heavier some nights, a presence lingering just beyond sight. I don't tell people this story. They think I'm crazy, and I wouldn't blame them. But I know what I felt, what I saw. Nova kept his promise, and I'm not alone, for now. But I can't shake this feeling that something else is waiting, watching, biding its time until the debt comes due. The house we lived in during the late 1980s in Dayton, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati, was a modest single-family home, but it felt like a fortress of secrets waiting to unravel. As a child, I sensed its quiet menace, a subtle hum beneath the surface that grew louder with time. My father had built a towering bookcase in our living room, a proud monument to his craftsmanship, but my mother's paperback novels looked out of place, lacking the grandeur they craved. When she mentioned this to her boss, who owned a rental house across the street, he offered a chilling solution. The previous tenant had abandoned boxes of ancient books in a creaky second-floor room, leather-bound and hard-covered tomes, their pages yellowed and heavy with age, exuding the patina that whispered of forgotten knowledge. No one knew why they left them behind, but her boss offered them for free if my father would haul them away. He did, box after dusty box, filling our bookcase with volumes that seemed to watch us from their shelves. I was too young to understand the weight of those books, but their arrival marked a shift in the house's mood. One night, my father, curious about the new additions, took one to their second-floor bedroom to read before his night shift. Opening it, he found a stamp marking it as property of an occult library in Cincinnati. Many bore the same stamp, while others were from the University of Kentucky. Checked out but never returned. Stolen, perhaps. The book, titled something like The Secrets of Solemn, held instructions for summoning spirits, angels, and demons, its incantations weaving a hypnotic rhythm. As he read, the air grew thick, pressing against him. Then, a loud bang shattered the silence. 3 sharp knocks against the exterior window. He leapt to the blinds, heart pounding, but saw nothing outside. No bird, no bat. Night crawlers don't knock thrice with such precision. Shaken, he returned to the book, its words pulling him deeper, until 5 minutes later, 3 more bangs echoed louder, more insistent. He bolted downstairs, out onto the back deck, scanning the yard's shadows. Nothing. No ladder, no figure, just the humid night air and the distant hum of crickets. The house loomed behind him, its windows like eyes. His pulse raced as he realized those books were no mere decoration. They were a conduit, an invitation. He gathered every last one, shoving them into a black garbage bag and leaving it at the curb for the morning's collection. I half expected them to reappear, clawed back by some unforeseen force. But they vanished with the trash truck. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had slipped through, a presence that clung to our home like damp rot. One November morning, I woke for elementary school, stepping out of my second-floor bedroom to the top of the stairs, the only bathroom to my left. A girl, about my sister's age, 14, maybe, climbed the steps, her left hand on the railing, eyes downcast. My sister, a cheerleader, often had friends over, sometimes early, so I wasn't alarmed at first. But I didn't recognize her. Her blonde hair fell over her face, and when she sensed me, she froze, her gaze locking with mine. Her eyes were empty, devoid of warmth or recognition. We stared, the air between us crackling with unspoken dread. Without a word, she turned and descended down the stairs, her footsteps unnaturally silent. Puzzled, I brushed my teeth, but when I asked my sister about her friend as we left for school, she frowned. No one was over, she said. My stomach twisted. Who had I seen? Had someone slipped into our house and fled? I hadn't noticed her clothes, too startled to care, but the memory of her hollow stare haunted me. Weeks later, my mother was in the hallway when she saw a blonde girl pass the doorway, as if descending the stairs. Thinking it was my sister's friend, she stepped into the living room to greet her, but the room was empty. The house seemed to hold its breath, daring us to question it. Another night, home alone, I felt the familiar dread of solitude. I was young, scared of the dark, so I turned on every light and blasted music to drown out the silence. Leaving the bathroom, I climbed the stairs, each step pulling me further from the living room's false safety. The bathroom was tiny. Its mirror reflected the top of the stairs. I left the door open, terrified of being trapped. As I stood at the sink, a shadow darted past the doorway. In the mirror's reflection, a fuzzy black sphere, its edges blurred, undefined, like a void in motion. It wasn't a moth or a trick of light. Shocked but curious, I stepped out, searching, but found nothing. The house was still, but I felt watched, its eyes complicit in whatever had just fled. Across the street, the house where my father found those books stood like a centennial, its own secrets festering. A policeman, my mother's friend, moved in, his living room a fortress of illegally copied VHS tapes, stacked precariously around his TV. The house always unnerved me, its air heavy with something I couldn't name. The officer's son, Brandon, was my age, and at 10, we became friends, drawn to mischief in our small, poor town. One summer day, Brandon claimed dialing 666 would summon the devil. I scoffed, but curiosity won. I refused to use our phone. My parents would kill me if the bill spiked. So we used his parents' landline in their kitchen. I stood by the side door, ready to bolt, while Brandon dialed. The corded phone pressed to his ear. As he hit the third six, a deafening crash erupted. Dozens of VHS tapes toppled, slamming into the TV as if shoved by unseen hands. I fled home, heart pounding, leaving Brandon behind. He followed, pale and silent, no trace of his usual bravado. We never spoke of it, but the house's malice lingered in my bones. Years later, in 2015, police unearthed a body in that house's basement. A 55-year-old former Air Force man, buried under concrete. His caretaker had used his credit card and pension after his death, pleading guilty to fraud, but escaping murder charges due to an inconclusive autopsy. The burial happened after we'd left, but it confirmed what I've always felt. That house was a grave. Its darkness rooted deep. Those books That phone call had stirred something ancient, something that didn't need a body to claim its due. When I was 13, we moved to Bellevue, to a stunning brick home with a torrent, slate roof, hardwood floors. For a time, it felt like an escape, but the house had its own ghosts. One night alone, my father saw the kitchen light flicker on. He switched it off, blaming a faulty circuit, but moments later, it glowed again. The switch physically flipped up. Footsteps echoed on the second floor stairs at night, and my sister felt a tap on her shoulder in her room, turning to find no one. My father, alone one night, saw his deceased father beside him, solid as life, offering comfort during a dark time. The words faded, but the reassurance lingered. Though the spirit's presence felt less kind to me, a reminder we weren't alone. Behind the house stood a double garage turned guest cottage, where my father and I kept our musical instruments. We jammed there, but the college's air was thick with menace. As a young adult, home from college, I stayed in its loft, waking nightly with the certainty that something was watching from below. I'd hide under the covers, too terrified to look. One evening, walking from the main house, I saw the bathroom light on, a silhouette moving behind the blinds. Assuming it was family, I entered, but the bathroom door stayed shut. I waited, then knocked, fearing someone was hurt. Silence answered. The door was unlocked, the room empty. No one could have left unnoticed. Another night, my father, alone in the cottage, played our Fender Rhodes piano before a shift. A woman's voice whispered behind him, "Should we show him or should we tell him?" He spun, hair standing on end, to see a gray-white cloud hovering over the sofa, its edges smoky but its form unnaturally still. He challenged it, demanding, "If you're real, beat on the floor." Two thunderous knocks shook the concrete slab beneath him, nearly knocking him off balance. Then, near the alley door, a glowing ball appeared, black, jagged, with holes revealing a fiery ember like coal. It floated toward the loft, the air crackling with intent. Overwhelmed, my father fled, leaving the door open. When he returned, the cottage was still, but he regretted not staying, haunted by what it wanted to say. Years later, my parents moved to a hilltop home in Dayton, its deck overlooking Cincinnati. The house was peaceful, but the wooded yard was alive with shadows, human-like figures darting through the dark, too swift to be tricks of the mind. One autumn night, my father, relaxing on the deck, heard a voice from the darkness. "You're going to get some money." A month later, he won $200,000 in the Kentucky Powerball. The coincidence chilled me, a reminder that the unseen could speak truth as easily as terror. Now, my parents live in a new town, their home free of spirits for over a decade. My own house, owned for 7 years, is quiet, untouched by the paranormal. But one memory lingers, a teenage experiment that still unsettles me. In the late 90s, I tried a technique to contact my guardian angel, writing questions in a trance-like state. It mostly produced gibberish, but when I asked for a name, my hand scrawled, Sarah Elizabeth. Curious, I mentioned it to my grandmother, who paled. Between my mother and aunt, she had a miscarriage. The baby named Sarah Elizabeth, a secret never shared with me. The coincidence or connection left me reeling, wondering if something had answered, something that knew our family's hidden wounds. These stories are our family's legacy, whispered around campfires, each retelling sharpening their edges. The houses we lived in were more than homes. They were portals, drawing in forces that knocked, watched, and spoke. I feel them still, a faint prickle on my neck, a reminder that the veil is thin and what lies beyond is never truly gone. The house we called home had become a prison of grief, its walls steeped in a suffocating sorrow that clung to us like damp rot. 6 months before my father's death, he lived with us, a shadow of the man he once was, consumed by drugs and rage. His violence forced us to cast him out, severing ties in the final months of his life. He didn't go peacefully. His death was a jagged wound, raw and unresolved. Since then, 3 more losses have torn through our family, each one deepening the house's oppressive gloom. The air feels thick with negative energy, a malevolent pulse that grows stronger with each passing day. The last few months, something has stirred within these walls, something that watches, waits, and makes my skin crawl with dread. My father's handiwork lingers in the house, most notably in the ceiling fan he installed in the living room. It was always finicky, flickering on at random, but after his death, it became a daily ritual, roaring to life at full blast as if possessed. The TV joined its sinister dance, blaring static or random channels without warning. My father had jury-rigged the TV remote, securing its battery cover with a tiny screw, a mark of his restless tinkering. I'd set the remote on the coffee table, turn away for a moment, and the room would erupt, fan whirring, TV screaming. I'd jab the power button, sometimes 3 or 4 times, before the TV would relent, its screen going dark only to flicker back on moments later, as if mocking me. This stopped when my mother canceled the cable and returned the remote. But the fan still hums to life occasionally, its blades slicing the air with an unsettling purpose. I tell myself it's faulty wiring, but the timing feels too deliberate, too personal. On top of our china cabinet, we kept my father's ashes, a heavy urn surrounded by photos that once captured his rare moments of joy. These photos began to fall, one by one, with no breeze or trimmer to explain it. A framed picture of my mother and him, one he dug out of a storage just before we forced him out, plummeted one night, the glass shattering into jagged shards that ruined the image. My mother, her face pale, took the remaining photos down, as if their presence invited further wrath. The cabinet now holds only the urn, its weight a constant reminder of the man who left us in anger and pain. When my partner and I are alone, the house comes alive with sounds that defy reason. Cabinet doors slam in the kitchen, with sharp cracks echoing through the silence. The front and back doors thud shut, though no one crosses their threshold. Drawers rasp open, their contents rustling as if rifted by unseen hands. Then slam with a force that rattles the walls. Chairs escape across the floor, pushed in or out by invisible occupants. Our cats and dog, usually alert, sleep through these disturbances or sit calmly in our sight, ruling them out as culprits. I've heard voices while showering alone, muffled murmurs that seem to seep from the walls, too indistinct to understand but heavy with intent. Shadows flicker at the edge of my vision, darting away when I turn. Last week, in the kitchen, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a brown humanoid outline, its form hazy but undeniably present. It vanished before I could scream, but its after image burned into my mind. These things never happened before my father's death, and I can't shake the feeling that he's tethered to this house, his rage undimmed by the grave. Yesterday, we buried my aunt. Her sudden death at a young age, another blow to our fractured family. The grief was raw, a weight we all carried home. Last night, my partner and I sought solace on the back porch, talking for hours under the dim glow of a single bulb. The fenced-in backyard was quiet. Our hunting dog sprawled at our feet, her usual vigilance softened by the late hour. Mid-sentence, a sound stopped my words cold. Heavy footsteps crunched through the grass, deliberate and approaching. Then came a growl, low and guttural. Not animal, but human. A sound that clawed at my instincts. It grew louder, closer, a predatory rumble that seemed to vibrate through the earth. My heart raced, my hair standing on end, a primal terror screaming that we were in danger. We scrambled inside, slamming the door, our breaths ragged. The dog, uncharacteristically silent, followed without a bark. 10 minutes later, we ventured out, our flashlights in hand, but found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed grass, no sign of intrusion. The gate on the side where the noise came from was locked, its latch undisturbed. The other gate was in plain view the whole time. No one could have jumped the fence without us hearing the rattle of chain link. Our dog, who chased any squirrel or stranger, hadn't reacted until we fled, as if she sensed something beyond her instincts. My mother, when we told her, went pale. She'd heard the same growl in the yard weeks ago, footsteps stalking her in the dark, but like us, found no trace. We've racked our brains for explanations. A prowler, an animal, a trick of the mind, but nothing fits. The growl was too human, too filled with malice, and the house's history of disturbances makes coincidence feel like a lie. The house is no longer ours. It belongs to something else, something that thrives on our sorrow. I feel my father's presence in every unexplained noise, every shadow, as if his anger has fussed with the house itself. The growl in the yard, though, felt different, older, hungrier, as if the house had drawn something darker into its orbit, something that prowls beyond the fence, waiting for us to falter. I lie awake at night, listening for the fan's hum, the TV static, or worse, the guttural snarl creeping closer. The urn on the cabinet looms in my mind, a focal point for whatever haunts us. I wonder if moving it would free us, or unleash something worse. This house is a trap, and I fear we are not alone in it. I've carried this story inside me for so long, a weight I've never dared to share until now. My name is Jen, though that's not my real name, just a shield for the truths I'm about to lay bare. Everything I'm going to tell you happened exactly as I remembered it, unembellished, unvarnished. It's about Tommy, the bad thing, the little girl, and the shadows that have stalked me since I was a child. Believe it or not, this is my truth, and it's a tale that makes my skin crawl even now, as I dredge it from the depth of memory. In 2001, I was 3, an only child living with my parents in a crumbling rent house my mother still calls the shack. It was a squat, ancient thing in the middle of nowhere, its walls sagging with age, but holding just enough warmth for us. The shack burned down months after we left, but while we were there, it was home. The concrete slab porch where I'd scrawled with chalk, a living room heater that warmed my toes before preschool, a bathtub ledge where I balanced to brush my teeth. My bedroom, carved from a corner of my parents' room, was barely big enough for a twin bed, a bookshelf, and my dinosaur blanket. I loved dinosaurs then. Their fierce bones, a comfort in a world I didn't yet know was full of darker things. My memories of that time are a fragment, sharp and vivid. I remember my parents' laughter, the smell of my mother's cooking, and I remember the others, shadowy figures I'd glimpsed from the corner of my eye, always slipping around the corners or ducking behind furniture, as if they feared being seen. All except Tommy. He was different. A middle-aged man in a dark black suit, with brown hair and a smile that would melt away any fear. Tommy's kindness was a light in the dimness of the shack, a presence that felt like safety. He wasn't always there, but when he appeared, we'd play, and his gentle gaze made me feel less alone. My parents called him my imaginary friend, a harmless creation of a lonely child. But I had a real friend, Daniel, who lived next door across the field of tall grass. We trudged through the path between our houses to play, our parents guiding us. The last time Daniel came over, in 2003, we were in my tiny bedroom, building log cabins with Lincoln logs. Tommy brushed past Daniel's leg as he entered, and Daniel froze, his eyes wide with terror. "Scoot over, Daniel, so Tommy can play," I said, confused by his fear. Daniel screamed, bolting to the front yard, demanding to go home. My parents laughed it off, blaming my talk of an imaginary friend, but I stood in the doorway, Tommy behind me, and saw Daniel's gaze fixed above my head, as if he saw the man I knew was real. That day, I realized I wasn't the only one who could see him, and Daniel never played with me again. By late 2003, my parents announced I'd be a big sister, and we'd have to move. "The shack's too small for 4, my mother said. They found a house in a nearby community, a single road lined with a few hundred homes, a tiny school, and 2 churches. Best of all, my T-ball friend Maddie lived next door. Our houses only 50 feet apart, sat on land once a single plot, a detail that would later haunt us. I worried about leaving Tommy behind, but when I told him, he placed his hand on mine, his smile promising he'd stay. My parents just laughed when I asked about him, but I felt his presence, a quiet vow. The new house was wrong from the start. Standing in the yard, I felt the chill, not from cold, but from something bad, seeping through the cracks like a poison. Maddie's house had the same sickness. We talked about it years later, marveling at how we both sensed it as children. 3 entities haunted our homes, their presence a constant shadow. The little girl lived in my house, a silent, sad figure who watched us from windows, shaking her head when we beckoned her to play. She was harmless, but carried a grief that weighed on us. The Twisty Man, a nightmare born of the land itself, prowled both houses. He was contorted, faceless, silhouette, blue-black like a bruise, swirling in ceiling fans or lurking in corners. He drained joy, leaving only fear, a void that sucked at your soul. Tommy always appeared when the Twisty Man did, standing between us, his gaze holding mine until the creature slunk back into the walls. The third entity was a poltergeist, a nuisance that moved objects, flushed toilets, turned on faucets, and toyed with electronics. One night, Maddie slipped over and we bickered over the blanket, each blaming the other for tugging it. Suddenly, it flew off the bed, slamming against the opposite wall. Such tricks were common, but they paled against the living terror in my house, my father. By 6, his addictions had consumed him, turning him into a monster. He and his friends, lost in their highs, became my greatest fear. One night, they hunted for me, their voices slurred and hungry. The little girl led me to a forbidden room, a boarded-in porch where the laundry sat, unsafe and off-limits. She guided me through the hole in a bathroom cabinet, showing me a loose board to hide behind. Tommy stood guard, nodding as I slipped into the dark. I stayed there, silent, as their calls grew fainter. The little girl's finger to her lips, a silent plea. I don't know what would have happened without her, but I felt the house's hunger, its walls complicit in their surge. We fled that house when I was 7, moving to my grandparents' home. It was a sanctuary, free of shadows, but I missed Tommy's quiet protection. A year later, my mother remarried, and we moved to a rural community with my new stepfather and his daughter. The marriage was a rebound, crumbling by Christmas, and I returned to my grandparents. In that brief stay, I saw Tommy often, his presence a comfort as I navigated the strangeness of a neighbor we thought was a witch, her backyard grave fueling our childish fears. One day, our babysitter heard footsteps, her face paling. "That's just Tommy," I said. "He keeps the bad things away." She didn't stay long after that. By 2009, we moved into the brick house, where I spent my darkest years. My new stepfather was kind when he was sober, but his drinking brought out a cruelty that fed the house's entities. The whisper people haunted my sister's room, their murmurs so loud she refused to sleep there. One day, leaving the bathroom, I heard their voices stop. Then, an old woman's whisper in my ear, "Shh, she'll hear you." I ran, never lingering in that hall again. The bad thing was worse. A 3-dimensional shadow, a void that stared without eyes. It paced the hallway, its presence a suffocating dread. My mother called it the hallway walker. Hearing its steps at night, I moved to the renovated garage, a haven free of entities. But the bad thing could mimic other voices, calling, "Mommy, come here," from empty rooms. Tommy always intervened, his presence banishing it, though it never stayed gone. As my stepfather's drinking worsened, the bad thing grew bolder, moving objects, speaking in our voices, casting a pall over the house. Tommy was my shield, appearing on the worst nights, his gaze a lifeline. My friend, later my college roommate, saw him in the kitchen, mistaking him for my stepfather, until the real man stumbled in later. Others saw him too, describing the man in the blue suit a constant guardian. The last night, when I was 16, was a breaking point. My stepfather's abuse turned physical, his drunken rage locking us in the house, our phones confiscated. I hid my sister in my closet, barricading my door, her headphones blaring to drown out his screams. Exhausted, I nearly gave in, but Tommy pointed to my vanity's junk drawer. Inside was my phone, possibly there. I called my aunt, who sent the police. As they arrested my stepfather, I met Tommy's eyes, whispering, "Thank you." He'd saved us. Life stabilized, but the house's entities lingered. My cousin moved in, sleeping in my old room, and asked if I'd seen the shadow thing. Staring at her. One day, I heard her voice call me to her room, only to find her at the store. The bad thing had lured me, but Tommy intercepted, striding toward her room as I fled outside. We sold the house before college, escaping its grip, but trauma followed me. Night terrors plagued me, and Tommy sat at my bed's foot, calming me until I slept. A playful dorm incident triggered a panic attack, leading me to therapy and medication. Tommy's presence grew rarer as I healed. The last time I saw him was after my son's birth. At 2 weeks old, I found Tommy by his crib, tears in his eyes. "He's cute, isn't he?" I asked, fearing he'd leave. His proud smile felt like a farewell. My son, now nearly 3, waves at the dark hallway, calling someone Blue Man. He's never afraid, and I wonder if Tommy, my guardian, now watches over him, a silent protector in a house that still whispers of the unknown. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to this, a mega compilation part 1. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for sticking with the channel, sticking with me, and remaining a loyal member. I cannot thank you enough, and words can't describe how thankful I am to have you on this channel. Thank you. If you are new to the channel and you listened all the way through, welcome to Back to Ashes. Thank you. We would love to have you as part of the family. And if you would, kindly leave a like, leave a comment, and if you like, hit that subscribe button. Become part of the Back to Ashes family. That subscribe button, make sure you hit that notification bell, set it to all, so you'll be reminded of every time I upload. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.